Narrated by Vladislav Ernestov. Sometimes, when you're left alone, the house begins to breathe. Not creak, not sigh with the wind, but really breathe. I was just a kid back then. 8 maybe. We had just moved. The war was over, but our home was gone. Burned down, turned to ash. All that was left was a key that fit nothing. Now it seems almost funny, but that was when I first realized something. Every house has a heart, and if you're lucky enough to hear it, you're not just a tenant, you're part of its memory. Most people think house spirits are fairy tales, old stories to scare kids, but I've seen them, or maybe they've seen me. Since then I've learned one thing: a home isn't made of walls. A home is something or someone that still waits for you, even after you've gone. I brought our home with me, to fit right inside my teddy bear's belly. The train breathed out a cloud of coal-smelling warmth and left us standing on a cold platform. 3 of us with 1 suitcase, a backpack, a box of cups, and a teddy bear with a button for a heart, a little crooked but tight. The wind smelled of strange stairways and new beginnings. Mom held my elbow as if I could crumble on the steps. We walked through the unfamiliar yard. Streetlights, puddles, the black snow with a gasoline shine. On the 5th floor, our new apartment was waiting. The key turned with a rusty squeak, like the gate of our old house, and I smiled. Inside it was empty, bare walls, silence. But in the air vent, something breathed, quick, warm, like the pause before a word. Mom put the kettle on. Dad silently pulled the curtains aside. I hugged the teddy bear close and whispered into the cloth, "Don't get lost." That night the house sniffed at us for a long time. A single floorboard creaked, exactly like the step at Grandma's place, the one you had to skip. The radiator coughed, just like our old kitchen clock used to tick, every minute on the dot. A circle of dust lay on the windowsill, a perfect mark from the ashtray we'd left behind. I heard Mom whisper in the dark next room, telling herself not to cry. Dad turned over and muttered street names, trying not to forget them. I quietly cut open my teddy's belly seam, hid a tiny old key inside, and sewed it back. "Listen," I told him. "Stay with me. You know the way." From the vent came a faint, warm sound, like a sigh, and suddenly I felt someone sit beside my bed. Not heavy, just enough to make me stop being afraid. Morning smelled like new wallpaper, and old coffee from the past. Dad was already gone. He said he had to start the paperwork. Mom stood by the window, staring down into the yard. I knew that look. She wasn't seeing this yard, but the street where the cherry tree used to grow, the one that didn't survive. On the windowsill stood my teddy, and the sun shone right into his button heart. "Mom, can I make him a rug?" I asked. "For the bear." She smiled. "Of course. Just be careful with the scissors." I cut a small square from Dad's old shirt, checkered like our kitchen curtains used to be. I put the bear on the rug, and next to him, a chipped cup without a handle. That evening, when Mom went out for bread, and Dad was still not home, I heard a quiet knock-knock from the vent. 2 times. Pause. 2 more. As if someone was knocking softly, trying not to scare me. You came," I whispered toward the grate. No answer, only the faint sound of breathing. "If that's you, I remember," I said. "You lived in our warm kitchen wall, remember? The one that hummed when it rained." The metal trembled slightly. "I brought the bear," I added, "just like I promised." That night he came. Not a man, not even a shadow, more like warmth that remembered a shape. The air folded into someone, sitting beside my bed. I smelled damp plaster and the bread Mom once baked. The teddy moved a little, as if stirred by a gentle breeze. "You found us," I whispered. In reply, a faint creak, the floor under my bed breathing like a heartbeat. After that night, things began to change. Mom started finding a thin line of dust on the windowsill, a perfect, straight trace, as if someone had slowly drawn their finger across it. Dad complained that the TV kept turning on, at exactly 11:40 p.m., no matter how many times he unplugged it. and I started hearing whispers in the radiator. Not words, just a tone, so painfully familiar it made my chest ache. The house was calling us by name, but without sound. One evening, we finally sat down for dinner, a rare thing back then. Dad had unpacked a few more boxes and suddenly said, "Look what I found under the wardrobe." He pulled out a silver spoon, old and scratched, with a faint pattern on the handle. Mom froze. That spoon had belonged to Grandma, but it should have been hundreds of kilometers away, in the ruins of our old house. "Maybe it just looks the same," Mom whispered. Dad shrugged, pretending not to notice. But I saw it, the small crescent-shaped scratch near the edge, exactly like the one Grandma had. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept feeling like the house was awake, listening, waiting. And then, just after midnight, a faint clink came from the kitchen. Not loud, not scary, like someone setting down a cup on a saucer. I tiptoed in. On the table sat my teddy bear, standing upright on his own. In front of him was a plate, with a tiny piece of bread, and beside it, a scrap of paper, with a single word written in pencil. "Do you remember?" I sat down on the floor. "I remember," I whispered. "But you're not there anymore." A warm draft came from the vent, and the paper trembled, as if the air itself sighed. The next morning I told Mom. She listened, smiled softly, the kind of smile you give when you're too tired to argue. "You just had a dream, sweetheart. You're exhausted, that's all." I didn't argue, but that night, I left a sugar cube and a small cup of milk on the table. In the morning, the sugar was gone. The milk looked cloudy, as if someone had dipped their fingers in it. Then the house began to change. From the kitchen outlet came the faint smell of burnt metal, the same smell our old kitchen had the day the kettle caught fire. The bathroom mirror turned dark, and for a moment when I wiped it, I saw our old bathroom behind my reflection, the one with the cracked blue tiles. That's when I knew the house spirit had followed us. Not just followed, he was rebuilding our old home piece by piece, from memory. That night I decided to speak to him. When my parents went to bed, I placed the teddy bear on the table like a mediator, lit a candle. Mom would have scolded me for that, and whispered, "Listen, we live here now. This is home too. You can stay. Just please, don't change everything." For a long time there was silence. Then, the candle flame trembled, like someone had nodded, and suddenly, the room grew warmer, as if the heater had turned on all by itself. The next morning, Mom did something she hadn't done for months. She turned on music, old songs. She danced in the kitchen, smiling. Dad brought home roses. They smelled like gasoline and frost, but she didn't care. That evening, I found a button under my pillow, black, smooth, the same one that had fallen off Dad's military coat years ago. That's when I understood. The domovoi was here, for good. After that night, things began to feel lighter. Dad found a job. Mom met a neighbor she could drink tea with, and I started at a new school. Strangely, my teacher already knew I liked to draw, though I'd never told anyone. On the first page of my notebook, I drew our old house, the balcony, the cat, the crooked fence, and on the roof, a small glowing shape that looked like a spot of light. That evening, I placed the drawing on the windowsill. "See," I whispered. "That's you." The glass trembled, just a little as if from a soft breath. "I remember you," I said, "but now we live here, and this is home too." From under the wardrobe, a single floorboard creaked, just one sound, gentle and content, almost like someone smiling. Weeks passed. Winter came quietly. Snow fell in lazy, heavy flakes, like ashes that didn't want to land. The stairwell smelled of varnish and jam. Sometimes, I dreamed of our old house, not destroyed, but alive. The lights were on. The domovoi stood by the window, waving. Then everything would fade into white noise, and I'd wake up with my heart full of warmth and longing. One morning, Mom said, "You know what? I finally feel like we're home." I smiled, but at that moment, the teddy bear slid off the shelf on his own. When I picked him up, something small fell out of the stitched seam. A tiny key, the same one from our old mailbox door. That's when I understood. He was returning what he once kept safe. I went to the window and pressed the key to the glass. Outside, snow was falling in thick white walls. And for just a second, in the reflection, I saw a small, round silhouette, like a person standing by a stove. "Thank you," I whispered. The air grew warm, as if someone had sighed right beside the window. That evening, Dad called us to the table. "It's been a year since we moved in," he said, "and we're still standing. Let's celebrate." Mom brought out a pie. I brought a glass of milk, placed it by the window. "This is for him," I explained. Dad didn't answer, just gave a quiet, thoughtful nod. That night, when we went to bed, something moved softly in the kitchen. A rustle, like someone brushing crumbs off the table after a feast. I turned on my side and whispered into the dark, "Thank you for not getting lost." From beneath the floor came a quiet, steady reply, a creak that sounded almost like the word home. The next morning I woke up to the smell of warm bread. On the table was a plate, and on it a piece of fresh pie. There hadn't been any left last night. Next to it, a small handprint in the dust. I touched it gently, and it melted under my fingers. "Where did this come from?" Mom asked. I just shrugged. "Maybe. The house doesn't like leaving crumbs." And that's when it hit me. It wasn't maybe. It was true. The house loved us. And the domovoi, he wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He was in the warmth of the air, in the smell of bread, in the soft hum of the heater. He was simply making sure. It always felt a little bit like there. I hugged the teddy bear again and whispered, "It's okay now. We found each other." From the vent came a quiet, satisfied sound. Knock, knock, pause. Knock, knock. That's how a house breathes, when it finally stops being a stranger. Spring came suddenly, without warning. One morning, the sun was real again. The air smelled of metal, thawing ice, and something alive. Mom opened the window, and from downstairs came the sound of someone breaking up ice with a shovel. The whole building stretched, groaning like an old man waking from a long sleep. The floor cracked softly, not angry, just lazy. I'd already grown used to the idea that the domovoi lived with us. He was everywhere and nowhere, sometimes in the shadow behind the wardrobe, sometimes in the whisper of the radiator. Dad laughed when I said that, called it old pipes and imagination. But one night he woke up from the same soft knocking I'd heard before, and the next morning he looked strangely thoughtful. "Don't you think it's warmer in here lately?" he asked Mom. "Spring," she said, but her voice wasn't so sure. I knew it wasn't just the weather. The domovoi wasn't heating the air. He was thawing the cold inside us. One weekend, Mom decided to clean the whole apartment. "I can't live in boxes forever," she said. She dusted the shelves, mopped the floors, and finally got to the ventilation grate. "Well, what do we have here?" she muttered, reaching out to unscrew it. "Don't touch it." The words flew out of me too loud, too fast. Mom froze. "Why not?" I didn't know what to say. I just felt everything in me tighten, like something deep inside screamed no. "It's dusty," I managed. "Let Dad do it later." She shrugged, but the air shifted. The light bulb flickered, a short blink like a nod. She left it alone. When she went back to the kitchen, I pressed my palm to the metal grate. "It's okay," I whispered. She didn't know. From inside came a muffled thud, soft and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. A few weeks later, we were given an assignment at school. "What does home mean to you?" Everyone laughed and wrote about moms, cats, and summer cottages. I just sat there thinking. Then I wrote, "Home is the one who waits for you, even when you're gone." When the teacher read it, she looked up at me, didn't say a word, just sighed and gave me a small plus sign at the top of the page. That day, walking home through the drizzle, I thought about the domovoi. He must be lonely when I stay late. And sure enough, when I came in, the door closed behind me on its own. Not in a scary way, just gently like a habit. On the table sat a mug of warm tea. "Mom, did you pour this?" I asked. She blinked. "No, I just got back myself." We looked at each other and smiled quietly. That evening, something happened I'll never forget. Dad was fixing an outlet in the bedroom. Mom was washing dishes. I was playing with toy cars in the hallway. Suddenly, the lights flickered, then a sharp crack rang out, like someone hitting glass. Mom screamed. Dad swore. I ran to the kitchen. One of the windows was covered in cracks, a web spreading across the glass. Mom stared at it in shock. "The wind," she said weakly. But the window was shut, and the curtain hadn't even moved. The air in the apartment had changed. Thick, heavy, electric, like right before a thunderstorm. "He's angry," I said. "Who?" "The domovoi. You were too loud. He doesn't like shouting." Mom froze, then slowly sat down. "You really believe that, don't you?" I nodded. She looked at the cracked glass, then back at me. "All right, then tell him." I didn't mean to. I went to the radiator, pressed my cheek against the warm metal, and whispered, "She didn't mean it. She's just tired. We all are. Please don't be mad." For a moment, silence. Then a soft click inside the pipes, and the cracks on the window darkened, blurring, almost disappearing. Mom gasped. Dad just whistled under his breath. "Well, I'll be damned." And I thought, that's what a real miracle looks like, when a house decides to forgive you. From that day, Mom started placing a cup of milk and a small piece of bread on the windowsill each night. At first, out of superstition. Later, out of habit. Dad still teased her, but even he stopped leaving his tools on the floor. "Wouldn't want the little guy tripping," he'd say with a smirk. But I could tell. He was softer now, like something in him had melted too. Sometimes in the mornings, I'd find tiny traces on the windowsill, like someone had crawled through the cold air from outside, leaving behind a sprinkle of salt. I never told anyone, just brushed it into my palm and blew it out the window, so he wouldn't catch a chill. One night I woke to quiet voices. Mom was sitting in the kitchen, talking to the teddy bear. "Thank you," she whispered, "for keeping him safe, for keeping all of us alive." I stood in the doorway and listened. From the vent came a soft, warm draft, like someone breathing along with her words. Spring was just beginning to smell like green things again, but the mornings were still cold. Mom woke up earlier than anyone, lit the stove, boiled the kettle, and hummed softly so she wouldn't wake me. Through the half-open door, I could hear the quiet clinking of dishes, the sounds of safety. The house breathed calmly now, like a cat purring in its sleep. But that morning, something went wrong. I woke to a sharp, suffocating smell. Not smoke, gas. Heavy, bitter. It burned my throat. From the kitchen came a hissing sound, like a kettle boiling, only there was no water. "Mom!" I croaked. No answer. I jumped out of bed and ran. The burner was on, a steady blue flame, and a pot had boiled over, spilling soup across the stove. The curtain had already started to catch. "Mom!" I screamed, but my voice broke. She was asleep in the other room, exhausted after a night shift. Dad was at work. I grabbed the knob, it jammed, and then the whole house breathed in. A rush of air, deep and powerful, like someone taking one enormous breath. The flame flickered and vanished. The gas hissed once, coughed, and the valve turned by itself. Click, silence. I just stood there, shaking. The pot had fallen to the floor. Above the stove, the air shimmered with warmth, like heat from a living body. And then, from the vent, something soft fluttered down. A square of old fabric. Our old curtain. The one we'd lost when we moved. It smelled like home, the kind of warmth that lives in memory. "Thank you," I whispered, not sure to whom. That's when Mom burst into the kitchen, terrified. "What happened?" "Gas," I said, but it turned off, by itself. She didn't believe me, not until she saw the prints. On the fogged window glass were 4 small handprints, Too tiny, too narrow, like the hands of a doll. Mom went pale and sat down. "Dear God," she breathed. "Who did that?" I nodded toward the vent. "He did. Our domovoi." She didn't argue, just hugged me tight and whispered, "Then he's watching over us." That evening, Dad came home. We told him everything. He laughed at first, that nervous laugh adults use when the truth feels too strange. But when Mom showed him the handprints, and I showed him the piece of curtain, the laughter stopped. He touched the gas knob. "It's been sticking for months," he said quietly. "I kept meaning to fix it." From under the table came a familiar sound. Knock. Pause. Knock. The house was breathing again. Dad met my eyes. Neither of us said a word. He poured some milk into a saucer, set it near the stove, and murmured, "For your service." From then on, the milk stayed there every night. The house changed again. It grew lighter, calmer. The walls didn't just echo, they reflected warmth. Even when we were gone, we could feel it waiting for us. Mom sometimes left a small bunch of dried herbs on the counter. "For him," she said, "so he doesn't get lonely." And Dad, before bed, always checked the stove and whispered, "Thanks, pal." He believed now, just didn't know how to say it out loud. At night, I'd hear the house mumbling softly to itself, a creak, a sigh, as if it were commenting on our dreams. I knew, even if we ever moved again, it would find us, because we were its family. Weeks passed. We'd almost stopped talking about that day, when I noticed something new. On the same window where the handprints had been, someone had drawn a perfect ring, a circle traced by a small fingertip. I called Mom. She smiled. "He marked us," she said, "so he won't lose us again." That evening, the three of us sat down together. And for the first time, Dad said it out loud. "This is our home. For real." From the wall came a soft, certain answer. "Knock." Pause. "Knock." Just like the very first night. Now I know a house is alive. It doesn't ask for faith or proof. It just is. Sometimes it lives in the hum of the pipes, or in the warmth of a forgotten cup of tea. But if you're ever lucky enough for a house to choose you, cherish it. Because one day, when the world roars and danger smells like gas and fear, only your domovoi will remember where your heart is, and he'll close the valve, quietly, at the exact moment. You haven't yet had time to be afraid. If the story reached you, stay with us. There are more stories waiting behind the next door. Sometimes all it takes is one quiet knock,